Welcome, Sarah. Welcome to the Launching IoT interviews.
So I am the CEO and co-founder of Swarm Technologies, which we started about 3.5 years ago. My background, I grew up in Canada. I went to the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor to do my master's and PhD in aerospace engineering, and had the opportunity to actually work on satellites that went to space. So got a little spoiled through that experience. And then I went to JPL, which is a NASA center in Southern California, which is an amazing place. This is the place that lands rovers on Mars and does all sorts of incredible robotic missions kind of in the solar system. And had an extraordinary experience there as well, working on big Discovery class missions, so like $500 million missions. And I was a lead systems engineer there. I also got to work on CubeSat, so small satellite missions. And overall, while I was there, I kind of learned the NASA way to do things, which is typically pretty risk adverse, but also, very learning from experience, learning from mistakes, and implementing those appropriate systems engineering approaches. And then after that, I went to Google X here in the Bay Area, and I worked on Project Wing, which is kind of a different thing with autonomous drones. But I'm a pilot, so I have some knowledge of airspace and aircraft controls. And that was super interesting because we were trying to apply a lot of the systems engineering principles that a place like NASA would use to a drone system, which of course needs to have very high safety standards and provide a product that's also something that consumers want to interact with. So how do you deliver the package without introducing any complexities or any safety issues? How do you make that end-to-end experience on time, kind of like the Uber delivery thing? And that was an amazing experience because I got to work on things that touch the real world and products and consumers and safety. So that was super interesting. And then about 3.5 years ago, my co-founder and myself started Swarm. And the motivation for Swarm, this was late 2016. There was a lot of really interesting things going on in the connectivity space. So we were hearing about Project Loon out of Google X and had a lot of friends and colleagues that worked there. There was Facebook's solar-powered UAV project that was trying to connect people in remote locations. And then the mega constellations like SpaceX's Starlink and OneWeb were starting to get talked about. And in looking at that landscape, my co-founder and myself realized, wow, these are all really big, expensive aerospace projects that require billions of dollars of CapEx and likely years to deploy. And isn't there something that we could do kind of more in the short term, particularly focused on IoT, because that was starting to get talked about a lot as well. People want to track assets. They want to know health and status of agricultural sensors. They want to track scooters and bikes and kids and animals. And it's really becoming this global issue where people are so used to being connected that they want their devices connected even when they're out in the middle of the ocean. So we actually saw a huge opportunity there. And our first kind of use case was around shipping containers, realizing that a lot of shipping containers traverse the oceans and are out of connectivity for a long time. And that really motivated us, as well as many of the other use cases. So that's what motivated starting Swarm. And we thought, instead of doing a big CapEx project that will require many, many years and billions of dollars, what can we do with really tiny satellites? And we recognized the smaller the satellites, the more cost effective they would be. So we challenged ourselves to develop the world's smallest two-way communication satellite. And initially it was just a board. It was kind of like a credit card. And that's actually what we pitched to investors in late 2016. And we were super lucky to find great partners in our investors. And they believed in connectivity and low-cost connectivity. So we took some seed funding in early 2017. That's when we started Swarm. Our satellites have grown a bit. They're now the size of a grilled cheese sandwich. So they're 10 by 10 by 2.5 centimeters, but they still fit in my hand. And we've launched 9 of those into low Earth orbit. So they're going around doing their thing. We've done a variety of testing and demonstrations. Most recently, we demonstrated that we could communicate with a small 8-inch coiled antenna, which is like the size of my face. So I was very excited about that. That opens up a lot of use cases in IoT, because IoT, people typically have very small, low power, low cost sensors. So they don't want, a big satellite dish connected to a small sensor. They want something really tiny connected to that sensor. So we've done a variety of demos. We've worked with Ford. We've done maritime examples, agriculture, and several other IoT demos with our customers. And since that time, we've now raised over $30 million total. And actually, that's more than enough to deploy our entire constellation. So we're going to be putting up 150 satellites, the quarter U that I mentioned, over the next year. We're actually already signed up for all those launches. We work with all the launch providers. And this is a very exciting few weeks because next Thursday, June 18th, we're going to be launching our first commercial satellites. So those are satellites that are actually licensed to make money. So we can actually start having customers on the network and charging them data. Early customers will be a lot of demos and testing, and then we'll transition to more and more paying customers through the rest of the year. So it's a super exciting month for us and year for us because we're actually going to market. And we provide services to a variety of different use cases, from agriculture to logistics to maritime to energy, to a lot of different IoT applications. One of my favorite examples is beehives in New Zealand and Australia and across the world. They actually have a lot of connectivity challenges, and we're able to bring back data. Plus it goes with a swarm theme, so that's kind of cool. And we've encountered a lot of super interesting use cases that we could have never imagined early on, from electricity metering to tracking whales, to tracking bird scooters, to tracking kids and dogs. We get requests all the time for super interesting use cases. And we also work with the US government. You can imagine asset tracking and messaging is super interesting to them, especially at a low price point. And maybe just to summarize all of this, the reason that we can start to expand the market and offer all of these IoT solutions is because our satellites are so small, therefore our launch costs are small, therefore we can share the cost savings with the customer. So we're looking at being about 10 times lower cost than existing incumbents like Orbcomm and Iridium. And of course, that opens up new markets. So Beehive, people could never afford super expensive satellite before, now they can afford it. And then there are certain use cases where, well, I only had my agriculture sensors in cell. Oh, at the swarm price point, I can expand beyond cell. So it opens up new opportunities, allows companies to expand, allows companies to capture greater margins, or allows companies to reduce their prices. So we're really helping those customers do a lot of things so that they can have more devices deployed that are actually connected to the internet.
Cool. It's so super exciting what you're doing, by the way. And I think there's been a lot of, pardon the pun, buzz around this for a while. And it's nice to actually see it begin to become commercialized, which is really great. So congratulations.
Yeah, we're really excited. I mean, the next month is going to be, I probably won't even, it'll be a flash. I won't even remember what happened. But we'll launch the first satellites. We're actually sending out these test kits that we have, and our first customers are going to get on the network. I'm sure we're going to learn a million things in those first few weeks. It'll be kind of chaotic, but we'll roll that into future revisions. One thing that's really cool about Swarm is that we have a lab space where we build everything ourselves. We're fully vertically integrated. So if we notice that there's a bug or a chip or any issues, we can immediately rebuild tiles and trackers, which are the two products that we're going to market with. And we can also rebuild satellites. So, or build new satellites for the next revision. So that's something that I continually, I'm really impressed with our team's ability to kind of iterate as we learn new things about the design and performance in the real world.
Great. Well, you touched on this a little bit in your answer there, because you named about 10 different use cases. So just for someone who's completely from a completely different other industry, how would you describe the IoT industry, or what IoT is?
Yeah, in my mind, IoT is largely remote devices that are out, in the wild. Sometimes they're in cities and they're connected to cellular connections, just like our phones, but often they're outside of cellular range. And when I talk about Swarm, I say, well, it's kind of like a walkie-talkie that's always there, that can bring back a message. Whether you have, a tuna fishing buoy in the middle of the ocean where you want to get back data, or you're a hiker or a backpacker and you want to just send a message to your loved ones that you're okay or that you need help. And it essentially allows you to expand the cellular connection beyond just where the cell pockets are today. I think we've all had the experience of kind of assuming I always have cell, right? But then you drive somewhere and you realize, oh, I have 0 bars on my phone. And even, here in California, which we think is like, oh, it's so high tech, it's so connected, I can literally drive like 50 miles in one direction and I'll have 0 or very poor cell. So it's actually a huge issue that actually 90% of the surface area of the Earth does not have any connections today. And that's the void that we're trying to fill in. But back to your question on IoT, it's basically a small sensor deployed somewhere monitoring something. And often it's really simple. It's just position, or it's, the level of a tank, or it's a temperature, pressure, humidity, moisture content in soil. It's a really, really simple sensor. It's probably, 1/1000th the complexity of our phones. Our phones monitor all of these things constantly, and it's such a small device. So it can be a really simple monitoring device. But often those IoT sensors aren't useful unless the data can get back to an operator who can decide, oh, I should change the temperature, or, oh, I should start the irrigation system, or, oh, I should, reroute that truck because it's not going to get there on time. So it's super important that that data can get back. Otherwise, the data out in the field is kind of useless just sitting
there. Cool. And if we then talk about, kind of take a step back and say, okay, so you're going to enable this whole marketplace, and all of a sudden it's all going to accelerate, and the potential that everyone's been talked about is all of a sudden going to be possible and cost effective.
Yeah.
If you're a company or somebody who's out there who's saying, okay, my business needs to become more digitally savvy, I want to start using a lot more data to drive my decisions rather than just do it the way I've always done. What advice would you have for someone getting started with an IoT project, or before they start investing a lot of time and effort and money in it?
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of people do get kind of excited about IoT and jump in without maybe asking some fundamental questions. So I think the biggest question is, what is the value or the ROI, return on investment, that you're trying to go after? So having cool satellite connectivity in your car, sure, that's neat and sexy, but like if you don't need it, it's just extra cost. So I think defining the goal is super important. So maybe the goal is, I would love to get, a moisture sensor back from every agriculture acre that I have once a day, so that I can make decisions about irrigation, and then flow that through. If I'm able to make better decisions about irrigation, what does that mean? I can save money, I can improve my yields, I can reduce maybe the cost of workers in that field having to go do monitoring or extra work, and making sure that you tally that up and you say, okay, that will result in 50K of water savings per year, let's say, and 100K of personnel savings per year, 150K. Okay, so how much is the cost of satellite? And if the cost of satellite to deploy those sensors and operate them and install them, there's some steps, and monitor them, is 40K. Okay, 40 to 150K. And then maybe those sensors can stay in the field for 4 years until they need to be replaced. Okay, so I'm saving, 110K a year. Okay, that makes sense to me. That's worth the investment. So I think that people really need to run through the math and make sure that it's providing the value that they need. Often it's difficult to do this because we don't know exactly how much water we'll save, or how much personnel time it will take, or if the yields will be that much better, or what that means for the marketplace. There's a lot of other externalities, but I think at least running through this exercise to make sure that the math kind of works out. Another thing that they may benefit from is if they integrate Swarm instead of a higher cost solution, they could realize, oh, we save, we now have 40% margins, before we had 10% margins. Does that mean that we could lower our prices, or does that mean that we could make more revenue by working with Swarm versus, a different solution? So that's another kind of cost trade analysis that a company should do. And I would also say start small. So we give out free devices, onesie twosies, so people can do testing. And we think it's super important that people do testing for their application and make sure that it works. and they get the performance that they want before they invest in anything bigger. And we always support our customers doing that. And if it doesn't work out, like it's not the right speed, or it's not the right latency, or it's not the right form factor, like no hurt feelings. Let's split ways, earlier on versus investing and then being frustrated down the road. So that's something that we believe in too. And we're fully transparent about the limitations of our system, because we only want customers that, makes a lot of sense to work with Swarm. And that's kind of a niche part of the market, the lower bandwidth IoT types of customers.
Cool. Thank you. And then you touched on it a little bit there, and also in preparation for this, when I asked you about your kind of what kind of success means to you, and a lot of it was around more kind of the goals or the data, and actually the value creation.
Yeah.
So I think like the question is really for you as a person, Sarah, and then also as a CEO of a technology company, what does success look like?
Yeah, I think success, it's probably good to kind of chunk out success this year, next year, and 5 years. I think this year our goals are really to get up these commercial satellites and to start to demonstrate that we can connect devices and bring value to those first few customers that we're engaged with. And so that means, certain, I'm very data driven, so certain performance metrics around latency, performance, reliability, data rates that are achieved, so that customers can feel successful. And of course, we set expectations to what we can do in the first year, second year, third year, and so on. So to have happy customers that are obtaining the performance metrics that they want in the first year is super important to me. I think in kind of the second and third years, getting the whole constellation up and seeing that we can support large numbers of devices, like we're talking hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of devices on the network on a global scale. I think there's also some business metrics. We're able to expand into new markets. So we're looking at several countries in Africa, in South America, Asia, several islands around the world that need connectivity solutions. So our ability to execute and expand from a business perspective is also super important to me. And that's because we are a truly global solution. And, our satellites see everyone on Earth at all times. We want to deliver this solution to the whole world and kind of equalize the playing field a little bit for these devices that can be connected and people that can be connected. So that will be very important to have that global expansion. And then obviously as a business, we want to start generating revenue, have a return for our investors. That's also super important. And then we have a lot of secretive kind of future looking things that we're working on. And I think that kind of climbing that mountain to the next mountain that will be even higher bandwidth, more capable systems, that'll be kind of the next challenge. And of course, getting there requires demonstrating the tech, raising funding, and demonstrating that the market is there, that we can go after those secondary objectives. So there's always a next thing, but we try to stay very grounded in kind of quarterly and annual goals and achieving those or modifying those. So that's kind of what we work against with internally at Swarm.
Okay, cool. And then just to finish off, we've talked a bit there about kind of Swarm and the technology and the marketplace, and also the importance of metrics and data. But I just want to touch on the kind of more human aspect, because it's, it's all technology, but it's the people delivering the technology after all.
Yeah.
And as CEO, and one of the younger people I am speaking to, by the way, also, are there anything you want to talk about regarding kind of the skills or approach that you need to have when working in this extremely dynamic and also very techy industry?
Yeah, skills for me or for the team or just everyone? Yeah, it is, most of my day is actually dealing more with the human aspects than the technology aspects. And it's super important to have a team that's really aligned to the mission of global connectivity. And what I find super interesting is trying to collect a group of people that have personal objectives that aren't necessarily about connectivity, but they might be about solving challenging networking problems, or building a sales organization, or building incredible go-to-market or marketing strategies. And I kind of feel like I'm collecting this like army of people that have slightly different personal goals that are really aligned towards Swarm's goals, or maybe the Lego building blocks needed to support Swarm being successful. And then keeping them really motivated and cohesive and integrated, which is sometimes difficult, especially in the remote world of everyone's off in their own place doing their own thing. So maintaining that sense of collaboration and kind of we're all marching towards the same goal while supporting their personal goals. And I think that that's maybe a little bit of a hack to make the company successful, at least in what I've seen so far. And we've managed to recruit and have some incredible people on our team that are truly those like 10Xers that people talk about. And that's why we have such a small team. We're only 22 people today. And we're having a few more join in the next few weeks, which I'm really excited about. But it's just such a tight-knit, small team, and the communication channels can just be really clear, and there's not that many of them. Every time you hire a new person, there's 23 new connections, plus all of the new group dynamics that need to be kind of worked out. So this is something that we think about a lot. And I think it's, what we're doing it's crazy, it's aspirational, it's inspirational, like it's so out there. So I think it's also important that you hire people that can get on board with such a kind of aggressive goal. And although it seems impossible some days, they're still motivated by that versus scared by that. And look what we've achieved. We have 9 satellites in space. We've raised over $30 million with such an incredibly small team. So I think, in every little step, you get a little more confidence that we can get towards that goal. So yeah, there's a lot of human aspects, and that's probably the most important part of it, actually, because if people can't come together, we can't build Swarm. So I've been super happy with our team so far, impressed by them every day, motivated by them. Like they're the ones that keep me kind of going when things get super, super tough, because, I need to show up for them and keep getting them the resources they need to excel. So yeah, it's probably the most important part of a company, honestly. So thanks for bringing that up.
Well, thank you so much, Sara. We'll just finish off there. So thank you.